Chapter 3, Life in the Wild. What was it like to live at Gombe Stream in 1960? Steel gray mountains rose up from the eastern shore of Lake Tanganyika. In the valleys between the slopes were forests. It was completely wild. There were no tourists, no safari groups with cameras, and no fancy lodges to stay in. Jane lived near the lake in a little clearing by a small stream. She was cut off from the rest of the world. Even the town of Kigoma was an hour boat ride away. Who besides Jane lived at the campsite? In addition to a cook named Dominic, there was one very important person, Jane's mother, Van. Van stayed with Jane for the first 4 months at Gombe. Mother and daughter lived in the same old army tent together. It had 2 cots and a separate area for washing up. Mosquito netting covered the front of the tent. Their toilet was outside, and it was a deep hole surrounded by a fence. Van was a middle-aged woman. Middle-aged means like you're in your 50s. Living like this was hard for Jane. It had to be twice as hard for Van. Yet officials in Africa had refused to let Jane go off alone to Gombe. They were worried about the safety of a young woman living alone. There was no way Van was going to let Jane pass up this chance to live with the chimps. Already past 50, Van packed up for Africa. It is easy to see where Jane's bravery came from. Having Van share those first months meant so much to Jane. It was better than having a best friend along. In the evening, when she returned to camp, Van was there. They'd have dinner and chat. Van kept Jane company while she wrote up her notes from the day. At first, she wrote by hand on lined paper. Later, she got a portable typewriter. What did Van do all day while Jane was out exploring? Van set up a little clinic. She provided basic health care to the local families. She handed out aspirin and cleaned cuts, and sometimes she helped deliver babies. About once every 2 weeks, Jane and Van went by boat into Kigoma. In town, they picked up mail and enough food and supplies to last until the next trip. They'd stock up on eggs, baked beans, and sausages. At the fruit and vegetable market, they bought bananas, green and yellow oranges, and passion fruit. 2 African scouts lived in huts not so far from Jane's camp. One always made the trip into Kigoma with Jane and Van. It was not considered proper for 2 white women to travel alone. The main job of the scouts was to help Jane find her way through the forests. These forests were home to the chimpanzees. Jane, however, did not like having a scout along. Why? 2 people made more noise than 1 person alone in the forest, and noises scared away the chimps. Also, the scouts didn't like to start off as early as Jane. She was always up before dawn, and often the scouts wanted to head back to camp way before Jane did. So after a while, the scouts let Jane explore by herself. Now she was free to go at her own pace. Sometimes she sat on the ground, sometimes she perched in trees. She could stay overnight if she wanted, plus being alone made it easier to remain unseen by the chimps. Because of how far away the chimps were, Jane carried binoculars with her. She took a tin box with her, too. It contained a sweater, a blanket, some food, coffee, and a mug. Jane always wore her hair in a ponytail, and she wore the same outfit every day, a tan shirt and tan shorts. Colorful clothes would make her stand out too much. She wanted to blend in with the background. Often she had to crawl through the tangled vines. She got bitten by flies and scratched by sharp grass. But nothing stopped her. Was Jane Goodall afraid of anything? Yes. She was scared of leopards. She knew the smell of leopards, and many times Jane caught their scent in the forest. One time she had to climb a tree to get away from a leopard. She was lucky. Leopard did not climb up after her. Instead, the leopard pooped on the rock where Jane had been sitting only a few minutes before. It's marking its territory, saying, "Go away, lady." Jane couldn't always see chimps. So how did she know where to look? She knew the sounds that chimps make. Hearing certain cries tipped her off that chimps were in the area. Jane would pick out a spot and sit. She'd stay for hours, quietly waiting and watching. Some days she didn't see any chimps. Even so, she was sure they were watching her. Other days she saw many. Sometimes a few large males would gather together. Sometimes she spotted a mother with young. Sometimes she caught sight of bigger groups of males, females, and young chimps. The trouble was that the chimps were always so far off, and they never were doing anything very interesting. Jane hoped to spy on chimps playing together or watch a mother caring for a baby chimp. Instead, all she saw were chimps searching for food. They climb up fig trees and pull off fruit. However, the minute Jane tried to move closer to them, the chimps would run away. How was she going to learn anything that mattered?